Today, I have some pretty amazing news. I also have some pretty scary bad news. You're listening to the Master Your Lens podcast, episode 196.
Hey, John Lee Dumas here, the founder and host of EO Fire, and welcome to the Master Your Lens podcast, the photography podcast dedicated to sharing inspiring stories, technical tips, and powerful secrets to help you become a better photographer. And now, your host, Matthew Jordan Smith.
Hello, Photography Nation. I hope you are all safe, healthy, and enjoying life. Today, I want to share a lot with you. This first part is to help you live a better life. We all know we're living through the age of COVID. If you heard my podcast last week, you know I'm back. There was a break. I had to do an emergency trip to the United States. I live in Japan. And this was my first trip in the age of COVID. I did not know what to expect, but it was an emergency. So I had to fly to the United States. But now I'm back in Japan. I want to start today's podcast by sharing the details of my trip home. Oh, and by the way, my sister is still fighting. So thank you for all your prayers. I want to start today's podcast by sharing more of the details, which I think may help you, more of the details about my trip home. I was on the East Coast in South Carolina. I had to fly from South Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina, then from Charlotte, North Carolina to LA, then from LA to Japan. Now, because I'm flying internationally and flying from the United States to Japan, there is a need to have a negative COVID test. And you need that test conducted within a 72-hour window of your flight. Because I'm flying to Japan, it can't be a COVID test from, say, any pharmacy. It needs to be conducted in a lab and have the signature of the doctor or lab technician. These are the requirements for flying to Japan. So I had my test done, and when I got to Los Angeles to check in, I submitted my paperwork. The first thing they did is look at the timestamp to see when my test was done, and then proceeded to check me in. They also gave me a document of what's required to enter into Japan. The first thing you need to do is download 4 different apps on your phone. These apps track your every movement for 14 days after you return to Japan. Everyone's required to quarantine and do so for 14 days. I downloaded all the apps, filled out the questionnaire. The questionnaire asks where you've been, how long you've been there, how long you've been away from Japan. Ask if you're a citizen or if you're a legal resident. I'm an American citizen, but I'm a resident of Japan. When I arrived at my gate, there were big signs everywhere, making sure you downloaded all the apps onto your phone, and letting you know there was another questionnaire that you need to fill out. I went online and filled out all the information. After I finished filling out the questionnaire, I looked around me. I'm at LAX in the international wing. I've been here many times, and it's always jam-packed, but not this day. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and LAX, the international wing, is totally dead. I've never seen this before. So, of course, what do? I pulled out my camera and started taking pictures. You need to document this stuff. I mean, I'll probably never, hopefully, see it like this again. There was a Starbucks, totally empty, closed, middle of the day. I took a picture. Oh, and if you're wondering what lens I used a 24-70 because I needed a wide lens. I photographed the corridor, empty as well. Now, every now and then you would see one person walking here and there, and I believe in a picture like this, you need that human element. So I waited to have at least one person walking in the corridor so you know there are people around. I walked around, shot a few images, then went back to my gate and waited to board. Now, there aren't flights to Japan every day anymore, so it took a while to book a flight. To my surprise, there were not a lot of people waiting to board this flight. At that time, it looked to be around 20 people waiting to get on the plane. Later on, I heard it was less than 30. The gate opened, I boarded the plane, found my seat, and because there were so few people, the plane was finished boarding fairly quickly. I was sitting in business class, and in business class, there were 5 or 6 people. No one was close to me. So what did I do? You know, I took pictures of business class to show how empty it was. The closest person to me was 2 seats behind me. Then there was another person 2 seats in front of me. But for the most part, business class was empty. There were a total of 6 people in business class. That's it. The middle aisle in business class was totally empty. Every seat. It was so empty that on the return flight, the flight attendant said, if we want to use one seat as a bed and one seat as our official seat, that's totally fine. So that's what I did. I set up 2 seats. Trust me, that will never happen again. Flying in the age of COVID. So I get to Japan, and the first thing they tell us is before we can get off the plane, we must fill out another questionnaire. We're all given questionnaires. After all questionnaires are filled out and collected, we're allowed to finally get off the plane. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Getting off the plane in Japan was unlike anything I've ever seen before. I felt like I was walking into a futuristic version of Outbreak, that old movie with Dustin Hoffman. Imagine it as a futuristic version. Well, that's what it feels like to fly into Japan now. Each person had to go through several different checkpoints, around 12 in total. Each checkpoint, you had to give a document or fill out another document. Now, at each of these different stations, there was a lot to do. You had to take a test, another COVID test on arrival. Then there were stations to check to make sure you had downloaded all the different apps onto your phone. Then there were more stations to check each and every app to make sure they worked correctly. Then there was an interview. And then one of the final stations is a check to make sure you have a way to get home. You cannot take public transportation. No taxis, no trains, no buses. So how do you get from the airport to your home? You must hire a special COVID vehicle or have somebody in your family pick you up. 3 hours after landing, I finally get to customs. And once again, they want to see all your paperwork. And most importantly, they want to check to make sure you had your COVID tests within the time limit before travel. Then I can finally leave the airport and start on my way home. Now that I'm finally back in Japan, I'm doing my 14-day quarantine. And each and every day, I've had several times where they've called me to check in to make sure I am where I should be, at home. 3 times a day, I'm required to check in through the apps. They also have random calls. And they have random video calls as well. All of this to ensure you stay home, stay put, stay in quarantine for 14 days. I'm just glad to be home. My wife's glad to have me home. Now, what do I do for 14 days in quarantine? Well, I shot a lot of pictures while I was gone. As a matter of fact, I shot 2 terabytes of images. I travel with the SanDisk Extreme Pro SSD drive. It's 2 terabytes. It's small, it's compact. It can fit in the palm of my hand. I almost filled that drive up. 2 terabytes. And this is just from my trip. Now, that's still images and video, but there's a lot of content. So during quarantine, I have a lot of images to go through. Maybe you're wondering what I use to go through all these images. Well, there are 2 programs that I use quite a bit. One is On1 Photo Raw 2021. I love this program. But there's also a new program, Nikon's new software, NX Studio, and it's really good. I go through all my images, all my video. Now, this takes several days because, again, I shot a lot of footage. Around day 5 of my quarantine, I get a call. Now, I thought this was just another call checking to make sure I was staying where I need to be, at home in quarantine. But this call was different. The call was from the Ministry of Health, but this time they were calling to inform me that someone on my flight from LA to Japan tested positive for COVID. They wanted to find out how I felt. Now, I've got to say, the moment I heard that news, I stopped cold. I let them know I felt fine. No symptoms. I also let them know that I had the vaccine while I was in the States. They said okay and asked me to keep checking in each and every day. I went back to editing. 2 days later, I get another call. And this time they say, "We're calling to inform you that someone on your plane tested positive for COVID." I says, yes, I got the call 2 days ago. But then they say the person who was infected was also in business class. Now they really have my attention. Now remember, there were only 6 people in all of business class, and it was a big plane. So we're really spread apart. But I must admit, I was a little more concerned hearing this news. They asked me to go and have another COVID test. They set it up, and they want me to come in the next day. The location is not that close to my place. But once again, I'm not allowed to use public transportation. No taxis, no buses. You get the idea. That's not really a big deal. I've now been inside about 7 or 8 days, so I decide to walk. It's about an hour walk to the location to do the test. But I'm just excited to get outside. It's springtime in Japan. So I walk. I do the test, which takes about 30 seconds, and then I walk back. I feel fine. It's a beautiful day. I get home and go right back into editing mode. The next day, I get a call. But this call comes a little later than they normally call. It's around 6 in the evening. And this time, they call to confirm my name, call to confirm the seat where I sat on my plane, and then they say, "Mr. Smith, we're calling to inform you that we have your test results from your COVID test." I'm like, "Oh, great, thank you." And they say, "Mr. Smith, you've tested positive for COVID." Yes, you heard me right. I tested positive for COVID-19. I was in a state of shock. They asked me how I felt. I told them I felt fine. They go over all the symptoms to find out, do I have any of the symptoms? I say no. Right away, my thoughts go to my wife. Is she safe? Is she okay? She has no symptoms. But we've both been at home all this time. Now, before this call, I must admit, I thought Japan was being a little overboard with the protection. I'm now very grateful for all of this due diligence. And it really makes me pause and wonder, is it really safe to travel yet? We all have to answer that question for ourselves. Now, there's one more thing I want to share with you about this part of today's podcast. Because I live in Japan, I'm used to wearing not just one mask, but 2 masks when I go out. On my travel from Japan to the States, I wore 2 masks the entire time I was flying. The exception being when I was eating. That was it. As I was in the States, everywhere I went, I wore 2 masks. Each time I wore a mask, at the end, I'd throw that mask away. Now, that may sound like overkill, but that's what I did. If I went out anywhere and came back, I'd throw those 2 masks away. Now, flying back to Japan, I had connections. My first connection was from South Carolina to North Carolina. I wore 2 masks. Then I had to change planes and fly from Charlotte, North Carolina, and fly from Charlotte, North Carolina to LA. I threw my first mask away and put on 2 more masks. When I got to LA, once again, I threw those 2 masks away and put on 2 more brand new masks. I say all this just to share how careful I am about changing masks. I also carry hand sanitizer in my camera bag. I use it often, but now I wish I used it more. In hindsight, if I could do that all over again, I would not eat on the plane. Now, yes, it is a long flight from LA to Japan, 11, 12 hours. However, I've heard that if you fast during a long flight, you don't have any jet lag. Now, I've yet to do this, so I can't confirm if that really works or not. But I think on my next flight, whenever that is, I'm going to see if that's right or not, and not eat on the plane. The other thing I would do differently, I would use my hand sanitizer before going anywhere, on my seat, going to the restroom, anywhere. If I get any water to drink or any other beverage, I'll use hand sanitizer on the cup before I drink. And lastly, on top of wearing 2 masks, I will wear a shield every time I fly from now on. Period. Now for the good news. Thank God for the vaccine. Maybe the vaccine has saved my life. At this very moment, I am in a special hotel. I have to quarantine here for an additional 8 days. God willing, all goes smoothly, and I'm out of here by the weekend. By Saturday, I get an official COVID-free statement, and I can leave and safely go home. Whew. For those of you who are thinking about getting the vaccine, if you're going to travel, definitely get the vaccine. Now, I had my vaccine on March 19th in the States. I flew out on March 29th. Not quite 2 weeks before traveling. In hindsight, I would have waited 2 weeks before traveling to make sure the vaccine had totally kicked in. Still, I'm very thankful I had the vaccine. I did the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, so it's 1 shot. And because I'm a photographer, I've been documenting the entire process. The empty plane, getting the shot, of course, the special quarantine hotel, and everything else along the way. because this is part of the story of our lives right now, living through quarantine, living through COVID-19. We all thought at first it was just 2020. We now know it's much more than that. I know we're all dying to get back to life, travel, get away, go on vacation, hug people, but we're not there yet. We're really not. Please be careful. But as you're being careful, document everything. Now, at the beginning of this podcast, I said I had really good news and some bad news as well. You've heard the bad news. Now for the really, really good news. Last week I mentioned I was giving away some incredible photo gear, Sekonic light meters. I was going to do so by having 4 different webinars. Well, because of my extended quarantine, I've had to change those dates. There are now 4 new dates for the webinar training sessions. In each of these sessions, I'm going to do something I've never done before. Now, you probably know by now, I love working with beautiful light. I'm very precise about using that light, but I've never given away any lights. Not until now. This month is different. It's my birthday month. My birthday is April 21st. And the day after my birthday, April 22nd, I'm going to give away photographic lights and other amazing tools. I'm going to have 4 separate webinars. On each webinar, I'm going to give away an amazing light and an amazing lighting tool. That lighting tool that I use all the time is a brand new Sekonic light meter. And that light, a Light and Motion CL1000/2500 light. Now, I'm super excited about this because I've never given away gear like this before. Now, this light is special because it does something that you can't do with almost any other light that I know of. You can use it outside. You can use it in studio. And you can use it underwater. That's right. You heard me correctly. You can use this same light underwater. If you're a diver, this is great. Or if you shoot in a pool, it's great. This is one incredible light. And I'm going to give away 4 of them this month. April 22nd, April 26th, April 29th, and April 30th. But it doesn't stop there. I'm also going to give away Sekonic light meters so you can measure your light. No guessing. You know, I don't like to guess when it comes to lighting. It's about being precise and getting the exact look you want. This can't be an accident. It has to be you putting in the hard work and making your image come to life. So I've got the tools and they're here for you. Now, to sign up and register and have your chance to win one of these amazing prizes, just go to photographylightingwebinars.com. Once you get there, register, but only register one time. You can register for each and every one of the webinars. That gives you 4 chances to win. However, please do not register 4 and 5 times for each webinar. That will disqualify you from winning. We want to be fair. The winners will be chosen randomly for each and every one of the 4 webinars. 8 lucky people will win this gear. Now, to win, you need to do 2 things. Number 1, register. You register by going to photographylightingwebinars.com. That's photographylightingwebinars.com. Once you get there and register, Then all you need to do is show up for the training. Now, in this training, what are we going to go over? Lighting, of course. I'm going to show you how I use my lights. I'm going to show you how I measure my lights. We'll talk about photography and how you gain confidence as a photographer. I mean, in any situation. How do you light in a small room? How do you get perfect lighting on a subject when you're doing portraits? Whatever your photography lighting struggles are, I'm going to try to answer them during this training session. This is just for you. Come learn and then have a chance to leave with something amazing, amazing tools. I want to thank Light in Motion and thank Sakonic for making this happen. If you love photography, if you love gear, and you know we all do, make sure you are there. Go and register right now. Go to photographylightingwebinars.com. Register, show up. We're going to have a great time. I'm going to share everything I know to help you move forward in your photography. Let's make this April the best April you've had in a long time. Now, I hope you're smiling. I hope you're being safe. And I hope you take nothing for granted. Every day is a gift, and we have to live it to the fullest. All right, Photography Nation, there's a lot for me to do. I'm still in quarantine, but I'm using my time wisely to prepare for these training webinars. I can't wait to see you, and I can't wait to give away all this amazing gear. Once again, a big thank you to my Sakonic family and a huge thank you to Light and Motion. I use these tools all the time. They're dependable. They make our life easier, and they're going to help you make better pictures. All right, Photography Nation, enjoy your day. Take your camera everywhere you go. Document your life. Don't just shoot for a job. Shoot all the time. The more you shoot, the more you are practicing and becoming better at doing your craft. You're training your eye. I had no idea when I was taking pictures inside the plane what those pictures would mean. Trust me, right now they have a totally different meaning. All right, enough of my talking for today. I'm getting back to work. Until next time, always, always dream big. Bye for now.